breakdowns aren't the end, they're actually the beginning of. Hey, welcome to Wow Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk about all things mindset, all things confidence, and taking action, even when it feels scary. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Your mindset shapes everything. The way you think, the way you show up, the way you go after what you really want, and it all starts in your head. So if you've ever felt stuck, doubted yourself, or wondered if you're really capable of more, you're in the right place. Each week, let's break through those mental blocks, shift your perspective, and start making things happen. So today, guys, I want to talk to you about how breakdowns actually lead to breakthroughs. And I want to talk about how and why your worst moments can actually be the greatest gifts. I've always had this quote, the darkest hour comes just before the dawn. And I know it might sound, a little bit morbid, but there's a lot of truth in that. And today I'm going to talk about why. I'm going to show you why breakdowns aren't the end. They're actually the beginning of the breakthrough, and there's something better on the other side. Hey guys, I would love if you could stay tuned to the end of this podcast because it's something very exciting to share at the end of it. I suppose two really what I would consider big breakdowns in my life that were probably the most challenging moments that I ever had, where I thought, like, am I ever going to get through this? And one of them was when I ended up 78 grand in debt through running a business previously, and it was in property and a number of things that went wrong or whatever. And I do remember like hitting rock bottom, and I remember there was like 3 days where I didn't really do very much bar to drink a lot of wine and feel sorry for myself. And I always talk, for anyone that's religious out there, I always say the Lord Jesus Christ rose on the third day. Well, I rose on the third day. And I remember thinking to myself, like, nobody's actually coming to save me. And I feel, I didn't see it at the time, and I don't think, when you're in the middle of something traumatic or hard or very, very challenging, it's very hard to see the lesson at the time. I know now I always ask myself, what is this teaching me? But at the time it was really, really hard. And but when I look back, um, I can see that I had to make some tough decisions I probably wouldn't have made if I hadn't have been, my back hadn't have been up against a wall so much. I pushed comfort zones that I probably wouldn't have pushed. As I said, I made decisions that I probably wouldn't have made. I had to take action because I knew nobody else was going to get me out of the situation. But it was that challenge that led me on then to have some of the greatest financial success that I've ever had. The same thing, like, a lot of you have followed me now for a while know that, like, I left marriage after a short period of time because I didn't feel that it was the place for me. Not anything to do with them, but just like, I just didn't feel it was part of my vision and what I wanted. I just felt that I was in the wrong place and in the wrong relationship. And I remember leaving that, and leaving it after a short period of time. A lot of people were very upset. My family were very upset. He was obviously really upset. And that was quite a dark time too, because I felt the world was against me. I felt everyone was annoyed at me. And I just thought, how am I ever going to, get out of this? But like, we do survive 100% of our hardest moments, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But when I look back, it was actually making that decision to leave and to be independent on my own. That's what actually has given me the freedom to build the life that I have now. And as I said, it's hard to see it at the time. You have to start looking at what is the lesson here and what is this teaching me. So I'm going to take you through that today. I'm going to take you through how to have perspective in those challenging moments, and, and where the lessons are. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is, I want you to think about, like, the gym, right? For anyone that has gone to the gym or goes to the gym, like, one of the first things you'll realize is that when you lift weights, like, literally what happens is your muscles literally break down first before they actually rebuild stronger. And that's why, the first time you go to the gym, it's really, really hard and you're really, really sore. But then over the next couple of weeks, what was hard 2 weeks ago has actually become easy. But the other thing that you need to understand is that if you don't push to failure, you don't actually grow. So in the gym, if you don't push your muscles to failure, you're not actually going to be able to, to build new muscle. And life works exactly the same way, whether you like it or you don't. But without having those breakdowns, those challenges that bring you like to almost to rock bottom, what actually happens is we just end up staying weak. We end up staying weak and we end up staying um, stuck. And, like as I said, like going back to the time that, when I had that debt and, uh, my career had gone off track and stuff like that, like, that really stretched me beyond what I thought I could handle. And, I've had many dark moments in business, but it's those toughest moments and those toughest months, that have forced me to actually pivot and scale. And I actually really believe that the challenge keeps coming until you learn the lesson. I think you have to learn the lesson. And that's why sometimes the challenge or the tough time can be prolonged, is because we're still not accepting the lesson in it. I don't know if anyone on here has ever heard of the butterfly effect, but the butterfly effect is about like how struggle creates strength. So if you look at a butterfly, it has to struggle to break out of its cocoon. If somebody actually helps it out, it never develops strong enough wings to actually be able to fly. So I know there's a lot of you out here may not like hearing this, but the struggle is necessary for the transformation. Like I know, like I don't like talking about COVID and stuff like that, but lots of people, like the whole world went through a struggle back then. But there was some people who really became really, really successful as a result of it because, their backs were really up against a wall and they needed that struggle in order to transform. And, what I have found is that it's like in times when, people have doubted me, it's in times when I've doubted myself, that's when I had to really prove to myself that I could do it. So the moment you choose a different path, when others are telling you to follow the safe route, it's understanding that like there is success at the end of that path. It's just staying focused for long enough to get to the end of it and not allowing the noise and to distract you or to get too overwhelmed in the challenges that are going on in that moment in time. And I suppose like when you think about like if you look at anyone that's successful or famous or anything like that, there always in the movies, like there's always the hero, isn't there? So like if you imagine watching a movie where the main character never struggles, it's like it's a little bit boring, isn't it? Every good movie has a moment where the hero hits rock bottom and then boom, then there's a breakthrough. Well, I suppose it's kind of the same in life. You're the main character in your own story. And, and right now, you may be in a situation, probably if you're listening to this podcast, you may be going through some sort of a breakdown, whether that's emotional, whether that's business, whatever, but you may feel stuck. And you may feel stuck in that, in life's movie, the messy bit in the middle where things aren't going your way. But you have to trust me that, like, the good stuff is coming, and that is where the magic action actually happens. And like I said at the beginning, the darkest hour comes just before the dawn. The dawn will always come. But so it's understanding where you are in that cycle to understand that your dawn is coming too. So I want to give you some tips and some steps on how to turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. And I suppose this is from the experiences that I've had in my life and what I've done to get myself out of those situations. So the first thing I want you to do is reframe the story. So whatever it is that you're going through, right? Instead of saying to yourself, why is this happening to me? And we say that a lot, like, why is this happening to me? Poor me. That's us being in our own victim mindset, and that's not helpful. All right. What I want you to do is I want you to reframe it. And I want you to ask yourself, it's like, what is this teaching me? I want you to find the lesson, because every challenge is a teacher. What is this moment forcing you to learn? There's a skill gap, or there's something that you a weakness or something somewhere that you need to learn, And I do believe that's where your real freedom lies. And until you learn that lesson, until you learn that skill set, you're going to keep staying stuck in that moment. It's like if you keep making the same mistake over and over, the lesson's going to keep coming back until you actually learn it. And what I want you to do is I want you just to take even just one bold action, like even small steps in the middle of chaos, do lead to big breakthroughs. And I always say to myself, this too shall pass. Like, as I said earlier, every challenge that you've been through, you've survived. Okay. It's in the growth. That's where your real, as I say, like your real freedom lies. So the small steps may be like, you know, when I'm going through challenges, I'll double down on the good stuff. All right. And I double down on the stuff like my exercise regime, not partying and stuff like that there, meditation, what I'm reading, who I'm spending time with, what I'm listening to, all that sort of stuff. I double down on all the really, really good stuff. And I take all those little steps like every day because I know that that's helping me to progress and it's heading me in the right direction, in opposed to not taking any action at all. And then not taking action leads to more inaction, and that leads to us maybe going down a route or a rabbit hole that isn't going to help us to get to where we want to get to in the end. The other thing I would say to you in that is that, like, don't take advice from people who are stuck. Learn from those that have broken through. I always think there's a lot of people out there that have lots of opinions on lots of different things. Doesn't make them true. They love, like, giving their tuppence worth of advice or whatever. So in my head, I always ask myself, would I trade places with you? So I look at people who's, been through maybe something similar to me, or have been through a challenge, and now they're out the other end of it, and I'll take advice from them. And this is why mentorship and stuff is so important. But if you don't have a mentor and you're going, oh, well, I don't know where to get a mentor, and that's easy enough for you, Sharon, you're in business, so you speak to other business people all the time or whatever. Like, if you don't have immediate access to something like that, go online and look at people who have succeeded, who have been through challenges. Look at what they're doing. Okay. But please, please, please don't ever take advice from people who are not where you want to be, because you're just going to stay stuck for longer. And what I want you to remember is that every successful person out there has a breakdown story. There's something that actually broke them down, that forced them to rebuild back up into the hero that they are now. Just to wrap it all up, just a few final thoughts. I want you to know your breakdown is not the end. It's the invitation to that next level. It's teaching you the skill sets that you can level up, to move on to the next part. The question is, will you accept it? Will you accept that this is actually helping you to level up, or will you just get stuck in the doom and gloom of the moment? I would love, guys, if you DM me, like what your biggest breakdown moments are, and let's work together in reframing it into a breakthrough story. If this episode hit home with you, I would love if you could share it with a friend who needs to hear it. But as I said, let's turn our breakdowns into breakthroughs together. Thank you for listening. Hey guys, so session announcement. I'm launching a newsletter based on feedback and from you guys. I want to share some more insights about me and my day-to-day life, some nuggets of information on mindset and things that are coming up, so that you can get a first look. So if you want to be kept up to date, just make sure that you are following me on Instagram, as I will be announcing the launch there. And that's my words of wisdom for today's episode of Wow. I hope this gives you something to think about, because remember, your mindset shapes your reality. The way you choose to think today will impact what you create tomorrow. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, tag me, or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Catch you next time.